Okay, how's everyone doing today?
How are you?
Good. Just gonna share the screen here. You guys can see this?
Yeah,
Yeah?
I can see it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right, so today we're gonna be learning about Executive Order 9066, which was a order made by President FDR, and it concerned security threats inside the United States during World War II. In today's lesson, students will examine the reasons for President Roosevelt's executive order for the Japanese removal and the impact that this removal had on the Japanese Americans living in the United States. And so this whole thing started with the attack on Pearl Harbor, which took place on December 7th, 1941. And I'm sure you guys have heard of this really famous attack. It was a surprise military strike that was sent by the Imperial Japanese forces on a United States base in Hawaii. And this ultimately acted as the driving force that brought the United States into World War II. And so this attack directly led to Executive Order 9066, and it proved to be a slap in the face to the United States as they were taken off guard by it and didn't really have any direct connections to the war before this. And so Executive Order 9066 was signed 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and it essentially authorized the Army to remove any person living on the West Coast deemed as a threat to national security, which basically just meant Japanese Americans after the attack. People thought, or the United States government thought, they were spies or unloyal to the country. And so this gave the Army the power to force people to relocate into one of 10 internment camps around the United States, which were basically restricted living communities where they were forced to work and stay there, basically with no freedom. And so we're going to be going through a short breakout room activity in a second. So we're going to watch 2 quick videos, and these are the questions we're going to cover with your breakout rooms. So just take a minute and try to consider these before we watch the videos, and then we'll come back to these.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so here are the 2 quick videos. Can you guys hear? No?
No, sorry.
Yeah, no, I can't hear anything.
Okay. Can you guys hear now?
Yes.
Japan attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941, prompting America to enter World War II. the war heightened racist attitudes and anti-Japanese sentiment grew. Many suspected their Japanese American neighbors might be spies or saboteurs. The military pressured President Roosevelt to take action. On February 19, 1942, FDR issued Executive Order 9066, which made it legal to relocate Japanese Americans from the West Coast. Over 120,000 Japanese Americans were taken from their homes, some of which were seized by white Americans. They could only bring with them what they could carry, and were shipped to remote relocation centers. Once at the camps, they essentially became prisoners. Nearly 2/3 of people interned were native-born American citizens. Over 1,000 young people from the camps volunteered for military service. Eleanor Roosevelt strongly opposed the internment. She visited one of the camps and urged FDR to lift the order.
We must not forget this. We must realize that one cannot tell the difference between a citizen and a non-citizen by just looking at him, by seeing the color of his skin, or by hearing him talk.
In 1944, the Supreme Court ruled that the government's actions were constitutional. In January 1945, the executive order was rescinded. The internees were released. In 1948, Eleanor Roosevelt helped draft the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which prohibits the incarceration of innocent civilians.
We must want our fellow human beings to have rights and freedoms which give them dignity and which will give them a sense that they are human beings that can walk the earth with their heads high and look all men in the face. If we observe these rights for ourselves and for others, I think we will find that it is easier in the world to build peace.
All right, so that was one, and at the end it talked about Ronald Reagan's act, which this next video will get into a little. So here's the other.
On December 7th, 1941, the Empire of Japan launched an attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor. In the following months, hundreds of thousands of Japanese Americans were rounded up and sent to internment camps under suspicion of disloyalty to the United States. But the feelings that paved the road to internment began long before the attack. For more than 80 years, Asian immigrants were viewed as economic threats, spurring various laws that effectively banned them from the country. For those who made it to America, the lingering resentment culminated after Pearl Harbor. Motivated by vocal outcries from politicians and military officials, FDR signed Executive Order 9066, empowering the U.S. Army to designate areas from which any or all persons may be excluded. He later formed the War Relocation Authority to establish 10 permanent camps, housing nearly 120,000 Japanese Americans, mostly from the Western United States. 2/3 of those interned were native-born American citizens. With only 6 days to dispose of their possessions, residents were forced to sell their belongings and even their homes for small sums of money. Internment camps were often situated in isolated deserts, prone to harsh weather, and surrounded by barbed wire and guard towers. Within the barracks, internees lived in small one-room apartments with little privacy and constant surveillance. They were only given a standard army cot, blankets, and a small heating stove. Despite these difficult living conditions, internees tried to establish a sense of community, creating newspapers, schools, churches, and farms. Even in the face of persecution, young men came forth to join the military. Nearly 33,000 Japanese Americans served during World War II, many of whom became highly decorated for their valor in battle. Yet as the war continued, public opinion worsened against Japanese Americans. Only 35% of the country thought they should be allowed home once the war was over. This sentiment kept the camps open for over 3 years. On December 17, 1944, the government announced that Japanese American evacuees could return to their homes. When they did return, they found their homes looted and their possessions gone. With work almost impossible to come by, many fell homeless and destitute. At the time, the federal government offered no assistance for those attempting to rebuild their lives. It would take over 40 years before President Ronald Reagan signed the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, paying reparations to each victim of internment.
No payment can make up for those lost years. So what is most important in this bill has less to do with property than with honor. For here we admit a wrong. Here we reaffirm our commitment as a nation to equal justice under the law.
USS Enterprise.
Okay. All right. So now, after watching those videos, I'm going to break you guys out into 3 different breakout rooms. And I'd like for you guys to just discuss these questions with your breakout rooms, and I'll come through to each room for a few minutes to see what you're talking about. And just consider how you would feel in being a Japanese American during that time. And I'll post the questions in the chat. One sec, sorry. Okay, so I posted the questions in the chat, and I'm going to break you guys up.
This executive order is justifiable. That's constitutional. So, in the video, it said that it was because of Pearl Harbor. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Does that make it constitutional?
I don't think so, because it impedes on like First Amendment and like a lot of other amendment rights.
I guess I'd have to look at the Constitution a little bit more. I think it's one of the same things that's being questioned now with the executive orders of not having gathering places and putting all these restrictions on it. I don't know. Interesting.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. You could go. You could go. Sorry.
Oh, thanks. I think that, like,
I don't think it's possible to justify it, but I think the United States and a lot of other countries like have histories of like using their law and using their government documents to justify things that are like completely disgusting and immoral under the guise of like extreme patriotism. Like I feel like it's easy to say that something is justifiable when you can code things or people as a threat or as dangerous. You can justify anything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
good
I guess
point.
that's true.
Yeah, and I mean, like you were saying, like just justifying it based on the people, but they said 2/3 of the people that went into the internment camps were Japanese born Americans, so like American citizens, and they still just had no respect for their rights and threw them into the camps like nothing happened. Um, so how do you guys feel about the manner in which they were forced into the camps with like no warning, no time to sell their belongings or get a plan? It's basically just like, I think 4 days and they had to be ready to leave and like uproot their whole life.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't imagine someone knocking on my door and saying you have to leave in 4 days.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what we would do.
Yeah. It really sucks they were put in that position, like, and really didn't get any reparations until 40 years after the fact, or even acknowledgement that it was wrong until like 40 years after the fact.
I think I didn't even realize that Reagan actually signed that executive order. Was that an executive order also?
I don't think it was an
Reparation?
executive. It wasn't an executive order, but it was. I forget the name of it. It was a specific act.
Mhm.
I don't think an order though.
Okay. I guess when I think in terms of like from a business management kind of perspective, giving them 4 days was like, we don't want them to have any more time because they could, be in connection with other people and make plans. And if we do this really fast, they'll have less time to make other connections. I'm not saying I agree with that. But I think from a business perspective, it sort of makes sense, but not from a people perspective.
Yeah, I could understand that. Like trying to cut them off if they did see them as threats as quick as possible. Definitely understand that. No time to prepare. So following the war, how do you guys think the Japanese Americans recovered in the years following the war? After just going through selling all their belongings in the camps and just coming out with like no real preparation after the war.
I mean, I don't know. Like, the video said that their houses were like looted when they got back, so it's kind of hard to imagine how they would have recovered.
Yeah, I mean, as expected, they didn't fully recover as a community until the mid 1950s, and overall it was just really hard on their community. All right, I'm gonna jump into the next group. I guess continue discussing and consider what would you do if you were put in that situation back during that time. All right. How do I do this?
I saw somebody with a very similar name, so I wasn't sure if it was you.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure. I don't think so though.
Hey guys.
Hey, Gavin.
Hey. All right, I'm just jumping in room to room, see what you guys were talking about. 2 minutes.
Yeah, we already went over all the questions, and we were just talking about like we didn't think it was constitutional. The way they were forced into the camps wasn't good, and it wasn't necessary, and it was probably very difficult to recover.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, pretty common sense there. Just getting your life uprooted like that, it's pretty tough to recover from that.
Can I ask you a question? Because we were kind of talking about it. In terms
Yeah.
of the Constitution, like why was it ruled that this was allowed? Like, do you know why?
I mean, during the time, like, people didn't like really have civil rights like we have now, or especially people of minority groups. So, I mean,
Yeah.
in theory, it was constitutional back then, but I don't think it would actually be allowed now. Like, no, the Japanese Americans didn't really have any group to stand up for them and say, like, no, this isn't okay, or, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna jump to the other room.
We gave him like 20 grand or something per person.
Hey guys,
What?
what's up? All right, so I'm just seeing what you guys are talking about for a minute.
Yeah, I think we're on the last question.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Well, I just wanted to build off the last point about like the apology. I also thought it was kind of interesting that it came from Ronald Reagan because I feel like he's a pretty controversial president. You know, I feel like a lot of people found him and his policy to be pretty racist. So I just thought it was interesting that he was the one that, you know, came out and apologized for it.
Yeah, I was
Yeah, no.
actually thinking the same thing when I looked at that, but
I mean, it kind of makes sense too because he was from California. You know, he lived in the state and he was governor of the state in the 60s when this happened. So I think kind of he knew a lot of it, and so when you're limited at the governor level and the local level of what you can do about these things because you don't get the kind of funding that you would from the federal. So I think he went in with that kind of understanding of it.
Interesting.
yeah, definitely.
Either love him or hate him. That's there's no two ways about it.
Yeah. All right, cool. Just gonna bring everyone back.
Awesome.
Have everyone back? No. Okay, good discussion, everyone. Gonna share my screen again. So, can I get anyone to share what their group talked about for question 1? Anyone just call it out if I can't see everyone.
We said it was unconstitutional because essentially they were using racism as the war as an excuse for racism, we felt like. And Luigi brought up a really good point that like during the Cold War and stuff, we weren't locking people up who were Russian. So I don't understand like why we would lock up people who are Japanese. It just seemed like something where it was a preconceived notion about a group of unknown people. So
Yeah, definitely. Maybe it had something to do with the Japanese actually attacking us, but yeah, definitely understand that.
But either way, it was like,
yeah, definitely feel you. Anyone for question 2?
For number 2, we said like the manner in which they were forced into camps was like not okay, because like to just force someone to uproot their lives in general is pretty messed up, but like especially on the grounds of their race, and that like, oh, you could be the enemy, we don't know, and just lumping everyone together with the enemy and forcing them out of their homes is not okay.
Yeah, 100%. Just straight up not okay there. I'm actually going to skip the last 2 because I have a Kahoot real quick and I'm running out of time. But from what I heard, everyone was on the right track in their discussion with their groups. So great job. All right, so here's a quick Kahoot. All right, anyone else?
I'm trying to join right now, but it's not loading. I'm going to try doing it on my phone.
Okay, cool. Could just join late. All right, so what was the main factor that led to the U.S.'s participation in World War II? Attack on Pearl Harbor. Good job. How did FDR initially respond to the attack? Executive Order 9066. Guys need to know that. Don't get it confused with 8802. Where did individuals deemed as threats to national security go due to Executive Order 9066? Internment camps. Good job. True or false? Executive Order 9066 gave the Army unlimited operating power inside the U.S. False. Not unlimited power, but the power to move people on the West Coast into internment camps. True or false? Japanese Americans were allowed to serve in the U.S. Army during World War II. True, which is pretty messed up considering they didn't have the respect at home. but still were able to fight for their country. And which president signed the Civil Liberties Act, which paid reparations to the damages caused from Executive Order 9066? Ronald Reagan. All right, good job, guys. Nice. All right. All right, so that's it for today. This is your guys' homework. I'm gonna email it to you. Just email it to me back. Just 2 quick questions about what we covered today in class. And yeah, just get that to me by Tuesday in email. All right. Thanks, guys.